You're not.
I'm not stupid.
And I was going to affirm that you're
That's
not.
right.
I would say that.
All right.
I would
say the what?
I would say that, Ward may be
funny.
He
may be.
He may be.
Sometimes he is. Not so far on the show. Speaking of which, great transition, Leroy.
Yes.
So, yeah, here we are. Episode 3, off the cuff. Glad to be here. Caught us in the middle of our kibitzing. I like that word, kibitzing. I don't, probably Yiddish of some kind, but anyway, kibitzing. Anyway, so we are here. We're glad to be here. Got some stories. I have some ideas, but Word advised me against starting off the way I wanted to, so...
Words of wisdom.
This was supposed to be off the cuff.
This is the only time I was not off the cuff, and I got his opinion on something.
We went and grabbed lunch. He's like, this isn't really
off the cuff. So you went to lunch together?
Yes.
We did. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And grabbed some lunch, came right back, but
spent all day together.
He's
next door. Sometimes we just come and talk, and we just spend our days
So where did he take you to lunch today?
Well, he actually did take me to lunch.
As a matter of fact,
I'd say the place was... Anyway, so I beeped out myself because I don't want to promote. It may seem like
he took you to a certain restaurant that he goes to every day and orders the same sandwich every day.
Yeah, exactly.
No. I ordered.
You didn't get the chicken bacon ranch today?
No, you got a wrap.
I got a wrap.
He's trying to.
The thing you got yesterday.
Yes.
He's
2 days in a row.
You're trying to be carb conscious for what?
I am. Because my belly is very carb conscious.
He's been watching on the show lately, the thing, and he said, "Look how slim and Slim Joe is, and look at me."
Yes,
we're trying to hide it with the table and the mic, but he's like, "Oh, it's getting harder and hard."
That's funny. That's actually very funny.
It is actually very funny. But yeah, he actually did buy me lunch today, but I'm going to buy him the next time. So
see, that's how it goes.
That is how it goes. That is exactly how it goes. And that's exactly what I thought you meant how it goes too. No.
Yeah, we'll see. No, although he did kind of owe me from yesterday anyway, which on an issue I can't bring up.
But you brought it up.
Well, I can't bring up the details because that will look very bad. But he does owe me, and I'm a little bit angry and bitter at him, but that's okay. It'll come out.
I let him down.
It will come out in other subtle and spiteful ways throughout the show.
I know. He understand that he's easily hurt. Joe's easily hurt.
It's like the story of the Cowboys fan who had something read at his funeral, and it said something to the effect, "I wanted the Cowboys to be here so they could let me down one last time." You know what I mean?
Oh,
that was really good.
That's so sad.
Not so much. That
was almost as funny as your Hollywood exorcist.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh! I read something today, and somebody said the same thing. Imagine Hollywood with an exorcist. I mean, come on.
They probably stole it from the show.
They probably stole it from the show, but it was still funny.
It was still funny.
All right. Well,
Hollywood.
It
was Jordan Peterson who talked about it.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he talked about it. And that validates everything I say.
I like that guy. He's really smart and bright in the things he talks about. Like on a couple things I saw him, but I saw him in a debate between
he was horrible.
And William Lane Craig
and that lady,
and the gal from Princeton,
who was just in left.
He was so out of his
exactly
his field of knowledge.
And
he looked every bit of it.
What's really interesting is I had the same.
So real quick, there was a debate between William Lane Craig, Jordan Peterson, and I can't remember
this lady on the meaning of life.
She had a PhD from Princeton, which what are they giving away? Apparently, it's a candy apparently for them, but it was on the meaning of life. So if anyone wants to Google that,
it's a good show.
It's on
well
video,
worth watching.
YouTube, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, just to
but
say
he was out of his element.
Peterson, yeah.
First of all, it shows
I love him in other stuff.
I love him in other stuff. It shows you just how great William Lane Craig is. I mean, if it was just him and William Lane Craig, it would have been even more pronounced. But he's great in his field, but he's not in William Lane Craig's field.
Well, it shows you when people speak, especially in that kind of environment, out of their field and don't do the proper thing. Notice in that video, which everyone listening was going to be like, "What the heck?" But I'll try to set the stage on this. So the idea was, what is the idea of? Phrase it again. What was the exact?
Meaning of life. What is the meaning?
What is the meaning of life?
Right.
Both Peterson and the gal both turned it into, especially Peterson turned it into the problem of evil.
That's exactly right.
And neither of them discussed the meaning of life. And matter of fact, what they did was when they took Craig's opening of, in a billion years we'll all cease to exist, as he was talking about meaning. And Peterson brought that up 6 times in his opening statement rebuttal, just couldn't. And to say that in 2,000 years we won't have meaning is just to destroy the idea of suffering and why people are hurting. It's that wasn't the point of it. Craig was so terrible.
Craig was coming from an ultimate perspective. Ultimately, if everybody dies, if the universe loses all its heat and everything within the universe suffers, what difference did it make ultimately? And the answer is it doesn't. Now, where Jordan Peterson just failed to grasp was that Peterson takes this ultimate thing that Craig is talking about, and Peterson tries to shrink it to the temporal. So in the moment, there's
suffering.
There's temporal meaning in anything that we do in the moment, but ultimately, at the end of it all, does it really matter? If you cure everyone of cancer in a billion years, but in 1,000,000,001, everybody dies, what's the point? Yeah. So
I mean, Craig's point was good, but Peterson totally just took it out of its context, and it's it doesn't mean anything.
He just didn't.
That's why he was which I was really disappointed in, because everything I've seen prior to that.
That's exactly right. And every other time we've ever seen him on television and any talk, he was surprises you with his depth and the quality of knowledge. But in this instance, he was just way out of his ken.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great.
You like that word.
Ken.
Have you seen that word?
I did not see it.
Oh, okay.
The apologetics guru, the professor.
I know, right? I'm shocked.
Didn't watch. I'm just,
He's just so far. He's so
just busy.
Past that stuff.
He's just super busy.
Yeah, I know. It's just beneath him.
It's beneath him to watch William Lane Craig, even though we read all of his books. It's just terrible.
I assigned those books.
He assigns
those
he needs to give us an introduction to his deeper thoughts.
Right.
So he's like, this is a good introductory material to what I'm about to.
I told him yesterday that one of my favorite things when he opens up in the class, we know that he's trying to trick us in the first 5 minutes of the class. He's going to present some problem that we're not familiar with to get us to reveal what we really think. But I told him one of my favorite things in the years I've taken classes with him is to try to push him off of his point. And I think we've successfully done it maybe twice where he's had to scramble, which that's saying something. But I try every time I'm in a class to try to push him off of his point. It's just a funny thing to watch him scramble.
Well, when he gets out of his depth of field, just like Peterson, when he's prepared for, he's just lost. I'm lost. I don't know what I'm doing.
Leroy, what do you mean? Leroy, explain to me. Will you teach this class? No, he doesn't say
that. And then Leroy wakes up and goes, he's ready.
No, he says, Leroy, where's your homework?
That's true. Well, I'm glad you said it. He didn't. That'd be FERPA violation.
That's exactly why I said it, not him.
Exactly.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
All right. Oh, you weren't?
Well, not in the show.
Not in the show.
I bring it up to you all the time. Text messages, phone calls, personally.
Messenger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to my wife.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I thought it was very creative to accidentally bring it up to your wife.
Oh my God. That is like for a husband. Wow. That is like the worst.
You threw him under the bus with
It's like
wife?
the worst thing in the world.
It's the fire lit somehow.
It's the worst thing in the world to have anybody bring something up to your wife. So she mentions it, and she brings it up with more poignancy and more, straight to the point. It's just really terrible. Awful.
Sorry about that.
Anyhow,
I'm not able to get him off his game very often, but I can when
go around him. Just go to the wife. Boom. Problem solved.
There's always the wife card.
I'll never.
Everybody has.
This is why you two will never meet my wife.
Oh. Except on every Sunday when we meet and we go to your house.
Except for all those occasions.
All right. What other stories we have, boys? I have some, but I'm waiting for the right moment because under Wars advise and wisdom.
So I have a theme today.
You have a theme?
I have a theme.
Okay, but
I have a theme.
Okay.
And it is a very interesting theme. It's one that we've talked about in class. And I think I asked you about it recently. And it was pretty much our duty to the strangers in our midst, the immigrants.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
In our midst. And the question I think that I've asked you and have kind of sought clarity on is the duty of Christians, is it to the world, the people in the world, communities, institutions, or is it primarily to other Christians? I mean,
we discussed that.
Have I captured that properly?
Yeah, that's the way we phrase it.
And that's kind of why I brought it up, because I think, at least from the things I kind of want to chat about today, there's a running theme about, how Christians ought to see immigrants in their midst, how we ought to treat them, what is our responsibility to them. And one thought, and one other thought, hopefully we'll get to because I don't want to dominate all the time, is I read something from a guy from Denver Seminary, and I won't say his name, but he fashioned this post about scripture and immigration, and he quotes a ton of.
Was it DG?
No, it's not him at all. Not him at all. I've never heard him talk about those issues, but
either way.
But this other gentleman brought up all these scriptures, but what he says, he fashions them in such a way that it makes the Christian's primary responsibility is to care for the immigrants. And we're not being Christians if we don't care for them in some way. And I think that's fertile ground to kind of spend a few minutes talking about.
It is. So you say when you're positing the primary thing, like even over sharing the gospel of Christ.
No, I wouldn't say that he would. I don't think he's saying that there.
Or primary.
We're from a social justice.
For a social justice.
Social justice sort of issue.
Yeah. Okay. Social justice. That's the primary.
Right.
What reason I'm asking is how would that work in comparison for him regarding human trafficking?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so that's why I'm asking. I'm trying to locate his primacy on it. Or is
the focus of what his care is, like he's saying financial, or I think that's what you're asking?
Oh, it's pretty much whole life that we're going to be judged on the basis of how we treated immigrants in our midst.
Primarily?
I don't know if he would say primarily, but he's fashioned the scriptures in such a way in his post to make it seem as if,
well, for instance,
it would be primary.
There are immigrants who are coming across, and some of them can die. I mean, starve to death. Well, if it's in summer or something like that. And so there are some churches that go out and they leave water, they leave food, not necessarily because they endorse immigration like that, but they don't want to see them die.
Right. I think that's a good thing.
And I think it's a very good thing.
Yeah.
And I fully support that. Yeah. So in that sense,
and I know we don't say this
more than that, though.
Yeah, obviously. We don't say this as uninterested observers. Like I have friends who are here, illegally, and we're born here. I mean, literally, we're born here, or came here right after
they were born here.
What I'm saying, when they came here right after they were born, like they were babies, and all they know since they were babies, is America. And I think for those people, we need to kind of think through how that works. I mean, where are we going to send them back to? They know no other country, but America. But at the same time, I also see where I grew up at, and I see people who, can hardly get a decent job because they're competing with people who are lowering their wages, who are not in a mean-spirited way, but that's just a fact. And I think as Christians, we just haven't kind of thought through, our compassion versus.
Yeah. Well, and there's there's a couple issues that come up with that. One is most of those things tend to be out of the Old Testament passages.
That is correct.
God's commands.
Like 99% of them are.
Yeah, but they tend to be very selective on the managing, caring for the alien in the land kind of thing.
Sure.
But they rarely cite passages that talk about the responsibility of the alien. Those sort of things. It's all just as if it's some sort of giant social welfare system that God had ordained in Israel that let the aliens come in, and then they weren't like providing everything for them. They were expected to make their own way. It was just sort of don't abuse them along the way was some of it. But the other issue, and we can go back to that one, but the other issue too was where he brought up my class, the ethics class that we talk about, is that, in the church, in the area of caring for needs, when we talk about primary, secondary, we're not talking about of all things, but just within that area of caring for needs, physical needs and financial needs, I argue that it's our primary obligation, our primary duty is first to the community of believers, and then out of the overflow is to those outside of the community of believers. So, because here's what I've seen is in so many churches, we'll have programs and ministries, and we'll doing fundraising for helping whatever the cause is, starving people in Zimbabwe, or maybe now churches do stuff for homeless people or for immigrants that are coming here legally or illegally or whatever it is. And they'll do all these things, which seem great, but the reality is there's people actually in their congregation who are financially hurting, who are suffering different, the loss of job, they can't pay the bills, they can't provide. And those people are often ignored, or they're marginalized to the point where they just don't show up because it's an embarrassment, or because they don't fit in with that. And so I think what we've done is that we've made it really sexy to help the others that are in need, that we don't care for our own people in need. And I think if you look at the New Testament, it talks about, hey, to not care for your family, that's pretty strongly criticized as how can you call somebody your brother or your mother or whatever in your family and not care for them? So I think there's a primacy of doing that we've ignored because we do this sexy, easy thing. We turn the church into a system of government, like, hey, well, I know I could take care of this person who has a need, but I gave it to church. Sort of like I gave in my tax, or I gave at the office kind of mentality to giving. There's no personal sacrifice involved or required of our caring for the foreigner or caring for the immigrant or whatever term we want to use. It's just sort of, I gave my tithes, and therefore now we have somebody that sends off a check somewhere and we did our part. And that's very foreign to what I think the New Testament talks about when we have genuine care for people. So, but I think it first has to come out of, do we care for each other first as a family who is suffering among us? And if we're not doing that, and then caring about the other person just because it's easier, doesn't interfere with our busy lives, and I think that there's a problem with that. That's the framework for what he's talking about.
I see one of the problems, a couple of issues I usually have with several different versions, and it sounds like maybe this one as well, is that the way we care for immigrants, the primary way is by bringing them here. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that as a biblical mandate. Many times, one of the best things that we can do is help them stay where they are because they have family there, they have relationships there. Because that brings them away from family. I think it's more of an Americanized version of immigration, as opposed and feeling self-righteous and feeling like I did something that was worthwhile. Where in fact,
that's kind of what I'm like. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of it. Like, if we allow them to immigrate, I've done my job.
Right. Exactly.
We get on the hobby horse of we passed a law, we let 1 billion people immigrate.
Sure. Right.
My duty's done.
Right.
I didn't want to know, but I'm just saying that's. I think that's
absolutely, and it's
mostly because it agrees with what I said.
Yeah, but it's a real problem, as opposed to it doesn't mean we don't help people. Helping people isn't only by having them immigrate.
Right.
It's a very small view of helping people. Isn't very myopic.
Don't you think that generally the people who immigrate are the best? They're the best. They're the brightest. They're the smartest. They're the most ambitious people. Generally, who take the journey to immigrate to another country, whether it's America or anywhere else. I think by bringing everyone here to America is we're robbing those countries of their treasure, which is
some of them are treasures, some of them are not.
That's true. But we're robbing them of the people who are best able to make change
because we educate them, we build them up, but then there's no idea that, well, what if they were taken care of in their own country and we help those countries be successful in their own thing, and then they were there making more lives better than we could.
Changing their country and making it better overall, getting rid of the corruption and bringing in the good.
Yeah. Well, who was it that did? I mean, I don't remember, but I remember seeing a guy does an illustration on YouTube.
Numbers.
You know the one I'm talking about,
with the gumballs.
Yeah, I think you might have checked
that thing is amazing. It's called Numbers USA with the gumballs. That thing is amazing.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Describe what that is, because I saw it a while ago. But
what this gentleman does is he puts a bunch of gumballs on the table, and they're in these long cylindrical tubes, and they
much like this,
much like that, and they demonstrate how many. Oh my gosh.
Only tall.
Yeah. But it demonstrates like nations. And then what he does with these gumballs is he begins to show you how, America can only take in so many of these gumballs before
it overflows.
The
tube that he's pulling
and then what he's showing you is that no matter how many people, no matter how generous we are, we're never going to be able to solve the world's problems by having everyone immigrate here. What we need to do
And he shows the world's growth.
The world's growth
far
exceeds
how much we take. We take in 2 gumballs, and 300 are produced, so to speak.
That's exactly right.
The gumballs represent, like, I don't know if it's
100,000 people,
right? 100,000 each. And he's like, all these gumballs. It's like, no, we're actually not. But we need a different solution than immigration, because immigration is not a solution to help out the world.
And here's the thing that I think, if we're all going to be reasonable,
not to say no to any immigration,
but here's the thing that we need to think through to be reasonable people. Just because someone talks about immigration does not mean that they're racist. If the first thing that comes out of our mouths is because you don't want people here or whatever is that you're racist, then you're shutting off conversation and you're not allowing people to talk through these issues, and people are not being racist. I'm certainly not a racist. I mean, I'm not, but I'm certainly not a racist. I care about people, but at the same time, I care about our country too.
Yeah. So. Well, and I think all those things are compatible with the Christian worldview of caring for those people in need. And again, I still would argue that this is not a feel-good solution of caring for people. Compassion is not, what do I do to make myself feel better?
Right.
It has to begin in your community of people. If there's people suffering in our churches and in the church that people attend, we don't even know the names of the people that show up there, nor do we care about them in many cases. And I'm speaking at a lot of broad brushstrokes here, but I'm just saying, on my experience, I've just seen so many people, like, they don't care to know the people or be accountable or have a relationship with them, but they'll feel so much better about themselves because they gave money that week and they designated it to the new program to help whatever. And then they go home to their house that is 3,000 square foot house with their 2.5 kids or 1.5, whatever it is these days, and living palatially compared to anyone in another country, yet they feel like, okay, I've solved the world's problems because I've done my duty as a Christian. And I think that there's, to everything in the scripture, compassion requires sacrifice. That's biblical compassion. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't political ways to approach these things about how many immigrate and what do we do, all this stuff. But if we talk about purely a Christian solution to that, it requires my sacrificing something of my life to help somebody else.
Which means I need to get involved with people at my church. And I need to get involved with people, period, and see how I can be a blessing to those people who are in need.
And then you find out who you're letting in.
Right.
When you're involved in their life, they're involved in yours.
Yeah. Who you're letting in your life, not your church.
No.
I just want to,
because we need to be worried about letting war into our lives.
No, who you're letting immigrate. Because, for instance, if you want to appeal to the Old Testament, which is fine, with Israel, there was actually 4 different Hebrew words used for people who are foreigners, people who are sojourners. There's 4 different Hebrew words for it. And one of the things that's common for all of them is when they were joined in the life of Israel, for instance, they were not allowed to change the laws of the country.
Oh, well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say, can you imagine if Israel let in all these immigrants into their country and then they changed Israel's? It couldn't be.
Well, they weren't allowed to.
They weren't allowed to. So to compare us to Israel in that sense is absolutely crazy.
But if you look at like Moses and others, Abraham, who was a sojourner, and others. Like Abraham, when his wife Sarah died, and he went before the people of the land and asked, "Can I have by a cave a place a burial plot for my wife?"
Right? Cave of
Machpelah, right?
Okay, to buy the cave, right? He said, "I'll pay full price," and he went before them and he went through legal means. He asked. He didn't demand. He didn't say he'd been there all these years. So he went by the laws of the land. He paid full price. He contributed, and he went by what was going on there. So he went into the community and didn't try and change all that's going on. So there's assimilation. Yeah. There's going into it and saying, I'm going to respect what's here to a point.
Well, that's where some of those
that needs to happen.
Some of those approaches, and I read the one you're at, but it just. People have to be discerning.
Right.
When we read these things, it's cherry picking select passages, stripping them completely from context, because those passages meet a certain political agenda, but not necessarily a biblical agenda.
Right.
In other words, what was the biblical purpose for those passages being taught? And so it's shocking how many even professors, teachers and educators.
I'm glad you guys brought up both of those points, because I think the part that you just talked about is the part that's missed the most. We deal a lot in America in compassion.
Yeah.
We seldom deal in reason, and we seldom deal in the rule of law,
accountability,
and responsibility.
Well, we don't do it in our churches. And here's the thing: is what I just heard a quote yesterday that that everybody wants community until it requires accountability,
right,
and sort of reciprocity.
That's right.
But everyone wants the community that doesn't include those things.
Right.
But then that defeats the definition of community.
Right.
Which
is
kind of where our society is going. There was an article, we talk about this later, but it goes along with that. Where in society today, what's being judged and what's being judged as valid is being judged through the means of what do people get from it.
Yeah.
So for instance, scripture. The youth don't see scripture as being valid anymore because they don't see it as being compassion oriented. So now, if you're not willing to, let's say, endorse immigration, and you're a Christian, full endorsement, then you're seen as an unloving,
right.
And your source of the Bible is nullified, or they interpret it only through compassion means.
That's exactly
the
right.
Emotion means, and so the authority of scripture is actually undermined that way. And it's not taken seriously because of that. So
yeah.
Anyway,
and here's the other thing: it's an emotion-based thing, but it's also a political-based thing.
Yeah.
Marxism so many years ago was the idea that everything is political.
Mm-hmm.
It was that political framework. Every solution, every problem is a political one, and that's essentially what we have done as Christians, globally speaking. In the United States, so many the churches led to this. Well, compassion is what is the political solution? There's no compassion. It lacks compassion unless there's a political solution, and that's part of it too. It's not just the emotive doesn't make me feel better, but it's like, well, yeah, you're recommending I should go and what about churches that start these homeless shelters and they're helping people get out of drug addiction, and like, well, they can only help so many people, but we need a bigger solution.
Yeah.
Well, even the bigger solution doesn't solve it globally, obviously.
Right.
It's like this,
right.
But they find, well, my solution is more than yours, therefore it's real compassion.
More valid.
Yeah.
Even though somebody else's might be even bigger.
What's very interesting about this, and this is, I watched a debate on guns again, but what was really brilliant about this discussion is, I really listened to the people who were talking, which is,
imagine that, listening to the people when they talk.
I really listened to them, and there were two young people.
At least he listens to somebody.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
There were two young people, and these two young people, they were both compassionate. They were both upset, as we all should be upset over, the recent events in our country in dealing with guns. But when the questioner began to ask them, okay, you have compassion, but do you have any facts? And do you have empirical evidence to back up your compassion? And when he started presenting them evidence, data counter to their view, they could not accept it because it went contrary to their compassion.
Right.
But they were willing to use their compassion, which was factless, which was not based on any evidence whatsoever. Factless and feckless. It was not based on any evidence whatsoever to deprive other people within the country of their rights.
And this is the issue I mentioned with scripture. Same thing, same point. That's it. They don't care if it's true. They care if it's compassion. They don't care. They don't care about truth. We don't care about truth. That's why scripture has no authority. They don't care about facts. They don't care about truth.
It becomes
You're right.
That's the emotional appeal.
Yeah.
What drives my emotions, my passions most, and then what is the political solution that satisfies my feelings that I have, that makes me feel from bad to good.
Right.
And as long as my emotional need is met through a political means, not other, it's almost like no other means is valid. You can't pray. Prayer is diminished.
It's diminished now. It doesn't.
It's just
doesn't
here's
do
my
anything,
emotional
right.
response. How do you solve my emotional response? Do something to make it
go
feel
in.
better, and that has to be a political solution.
What was very interesting was, and it was one of the best. You should. It's Louder with Crowder, and he has this little deal called "Change My Mind," and it's about guns. I highly recommend that you watch it because, first of all, in this one, the people are actually engaging in real dialogue.
Yeah.
And they're not yelling at each other. I mean, they're pushing back and forth, but it's a real dialogue. But the thing that really amazed me was when he points out that 500,000 to 3 million people, just by simply having a gun, prevents harm due to them, And then he points out that 5.7 times more when a gun is used, it is used in defense of people. And in the light of that data, I mean, overwhelmingly, that the point is the use of the gun is defensive and protecting. They're still willing to say, you know what, we need to get rid of these things because they're bad. But at the same time, they're going to tell you that the government is bad too. But they're going to give the government
trust the government. I think
they're going to trust the government that they think is bad and give them all of our guns.
Even though the woman who's being victimized can protect herself with a gun,
because she's not as big, and she's not as strong, and she's not as fast.
Yeah.
Right.
But
There you go.
they
Right.
still.
So
We need to switch.
Leroy keeps bringing up guns.
Yeah, because
So now I'm gonna. I have a question for you
Got a gun show.
because you keep bringing it up.
Yeah.
Welcome to the gun show.
That's right.
All right, so I got Leroy. Some of our people watching.
Well, yeah. Are you gonna? What we're
Yeah,
for?
yeah.
How about if
This is a good transition.
How is it? Because I have
No,
a transition
it's great.
for it.
No, okay. Do you have a better transition than what I have?
Well, I don't know what that one is, but I have a
it's good. My line is good. This is good.
All right.
This is
How are you
good.
going to let him win, man?
You gotta trust me on this one.
I got
You gotta
trust
trust
a
me on
little
this
bit.
one.
I got to trust.
Okay, Leroy. So some of our people who have
We'll
been
compare
watching.
transitions. How's that?
Boom.
You'll
We'll
do
do
your
mine.
transition, then I'm going to bring up mine.
Okay, and then we can vote on
Yeah,
it.
then
We can
he'll
have
vote
people
on it.
listening.
It's him.
We
'Cause
can-
we know where it's going, so he's the one. His vote is the only one that counts.
We can vote. We can vote already.
Anybody who watches can vote. Post which is the better transition.
Right.
Put number 1 for me, number 2 for Word.
Oh, yeah.
Implying I'm
Yeah.
biasing
I see
them.
what you did there.
See what I did there?
Uh-huh.
All right, so Leroy, several people have noticed and watched that you are a black man. So
You know,
a few have noticed that.
I've heard that before in my life.
Yeah.
What?
So because of that, I have a question for you. This is actually a question that was posed. Now I saw this on Facebook. It shocked me a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because the source of it. This is a Christian guy, well educated. He's a professor guy. You think has some sort of biblical foundation knowledge, and this question irritated me because of the way it approaches. But I don't want to bias it too much. But here's the question that he posted: big letters on a big red background. Question, all caps, of course, yelling at it. Would you like to be a black teacher holding a handgun when the cops show up at a school shooting?
That's right.
Listen.
That was his question.
Listen. It's such a.
That was my transition.
First of all, it's such a dumb. I hate to say it, it's just a dumb question.
That's
Because
what is your thought on that?
Because what it presupposes is that as soon as the cops walk in, they see a black guy with a gun. The black guy must be guilty, and that is not how it works. That's how it works in a fictional world.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
But isn't that disappointing that
Well,
who's supposed to be educated and a Christian thinker, a
listen,
worldview,
I understand what you're saying,
but just take these emotional issues of guns and black people and
it's
cops.
just
It just rolls it all into one question.
Serial killers are
trying to
not
make people angry.
serial killers. There's a few, but they're on the main, not black. School shooters on the main are not black people. They're just not. I mean, you don't have to believe me. Google it.
Yeah.
So if a cop showed up at a school and he sees a black guy with a gun, 9 times he's not even going to think that I'm the guy shooting, because that's generally not the people doing the shooting at schools. It just isn't.
Yeah.
So I mean, but it's just a dumb thing, because now it just assumes that everybody that shows up is a racist, and they're going to immediately assume.
See, that's exactly what bugged me about even posing this question from somebody who's supposed to be educated, supposed to be a thinker, supposed to have a Christian worldview.
Yeah.
That they take a question that plays on the bias of the person reading, bias about cops, bias about guns, bias about black or race, white, or any kind of racial issue, and it tries to roll it into one question to be the most sensationalized way of doing it.
First, let me tell you, there's a book called The War on Cops by McDonald is her last name, and she'll tell you. This gal is absolutely incredible. She will tell you that black cops are more likely to shoot black people than white cops are.
Oh, and
statistically,
and Hispanic from heritage. It's from heritage.
Right. They're more likely to shoot black people than white cops are. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if a bunch of white guys rolled up on the scene and I got a gun, 9 times out of 10, if I don't point it at someone, I'm going to live, because they're going to be afraid to be seen shooting me. You know what I mean? Because of the drama that is going to come after that. You see what I mean? But the moment you raise that gun up and you point it at them, then obviously you're all bets are off. You know what I mean? But it just doesn't pass the smell test, is what I'm getting at.
No, it doesn't.
I saw that as well. I saw that
did
before.
you see?
Yeah, I did see that. And my thought was, well, would you like to be the black man on campus who is there without a gun and the shooter shows up?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just stupid. It's like, well,
it's just
we know what happens when shooters show up and there's no one there to protect them, or if there is, and they're cowards, but and they fail to do it. It's just
we just have to do better. That's just what infuriates me. Is that we have to do better.
The goal is not for truth here. Once again, the goal is not truth.
Well, it isn't. Exactly.
I think the most insulting thing is
divisive.
Yeah, but the most insulting thing is the guy is supposed to be right. Yeah, is the guy supposed to be a professor?
Exactly.
That's the most insulting thing.
I would expect that from somebody uneducated, possibly, who's never thought deeply about things.
If our educated professors are doing this, our education stinks, which I think it does in many
I'm gonna make a provocative statement here. I grew up in Philadelphia, love the city of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia,
West Philadelphia, right?
Southwest Philadelphia,
Southwest Philadelphia.
Born and raised. And I grew up. Rizzo was the mayor, and Rizzo was hard on black people. It's just the deal. It's just how it was. Rizzo was hard on black people. But I will tell you this. A lot of black people, especially if you're older and you understand what I'm talking about, there's a right and a wrong. It just seems to me that nowadays that younger black people have just pushed aside the point of right and wrong in some of these issues. Some of the most intelligent people that I know and are reverting to just mere issues of race and emotion to solve some of these questions. And they're not doing a service. They're not doing good for any of us.
Whoever's angriest, except unless they're conservative Christian, whoever's angriest is rightist.
See, my point is, everybody that you want to be mad at about slavery is dead. For the most part, everybody that you want to be mad
except for the people enslaving people today, right now in the world.
In Libya, because of
parts of Africa, Muslims living.
But everybody in our country that you want to be mad at about slavery is dead.
And everyone who had a legitimate right to be mad about being a slave
is dead. And what you want right now is you want to hold people who haven't done anything
to someone who hasn't had anything done to them
guilty.
In that way.
You can't do that because that's not just.
Right. Exactly.
Anyhow, we're the victimhood thing. Anyway, my whole thing is, just on this.
It's just silly.
We are lost as a Christian people, as the church. If our worldview is so weak that we have to pander to emotionalism, to experientialism, to who can elicit the most anger by your question. If that's the state of what our supposed Christian thinkers have been reduced to, we are in a whole lot of trouble. And it's just the source. Again, it was for me, the source of this was so troubling because of that.
Is the name on there? I've heard the name.
Yeah, I don't want to say it though.
No, don't say it.
Yeah, I don't want to say it.
He's horrible. I'm just kidding.
I've seen that guy.
I've seen that guy before. I saw
the post.
But it's
probably somebody else posted.
It's just horrible. It's just bad thinking.
Yeah,
it's just bad. First of all, it maligns the police officers. All police officers are just,
guns ablazing.
Guns ablazing.
We know that's not
the
case.
way I introduced it, although humorous, clearly, and vote for me if you like that. But I did it that way also intentionally. There's another reason for that. Because by me saying, "Oh, Leroy, you're the obvious black man," let me ask you. It almost assumes that you have
the answer.
You have to have the answer, or have to have the response.
Yeah, because it's the black response.
The most emotionalism.
It's the black response, and the black response has got to be right.
Yeah, the question itself assumes that there is a black response and a white thing,
rather than a right response and a wrong response.
Yeah, right. Humorous. I introduced it, but again, it's that whole idea of just assuming. Oh, let me pose this question that divide us into these fictional groups of race and age and gender and all these things and I say fictional in the sense of how the culture has deformed them to be, and then elicit a response based on that.
Heather McDonald's her name. The War on Cops. It's a great book. Great book. And really what that book really talks about are statistics. And I was in the military. I was in the Marine Corps, the best fighting force in the face of the earth in the history of the world, greater than anything that's ever been produced. And my mindset in these issues are, I put myself in the position of the police officer.
The merchant Marines is your speaking.
No, I'm talking about that.
But I was clarifying when you said Marines.
Because when you're in the military, you're in a police. Your goal. I remember when we went to war. I told my guys. Right then. I told my guys. I said,
merchant Marine.
I told my guys, we're going to err on the side, and every decision that we make, we're going to err on the side of our guys coming home. I would rather you be tried by 12 than carried by 6. So we're going to err because we're not here to, adjudicate. That's all been done by the politicians. We're here to win and go home, period. Point blank. That's just how it boils down to. And police officers, when they show up on the scene, they have a little bit more responsibility than that. But police officers want to go home that night too. So if you comply with the police officer, then you can actually go and adjudicate your rights. Take the police officer to court. If the police officer, you think he's wrong, you take him to court. You sue, for your rights if that's the case. So you comply. So if the police officers show up on the scene and I have a gun, and the police officers tell me to put the gun down, then I put it down. But if I'm shooting the bad guy, that's not going to be based on whether I'm black or white. That's going to be based on whether their ability to discern whether I'm an aggressor or not, or whether I'm the shooter or not, or whether I fit the profile or not. And that's not. There's more to go. That's more complex than just the police officer showing up in the scene and the black guy with a gun. It's just more complex than that. Yeah. So anyhow.
Yeah. Yeah, it reduces a lot of complexity just emotionally.
It just absolutely does.
So what was your transition?
Let's see what your transition was.
So what was your transition? Can it compare with that? I think not.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
but I'm not biased.
Well, my segue was going to be into the issue, but it's actually a nice segue out of the issue.
Oh,
actually.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. It is. I had a conversation last night with my daughter as we're going to bed.
You have children?
And I do.
Oh, he's going for the cute heartstring factor.
Hey,
4-year-old.
Can't 4-year-old. See, right there. You've already lost.
No, not ready.
Oh, yeah, no.
That's still.
It's over, man.
That helps your transition.
Well, see,
that doesn't get it over
you have to mock it because you can't really.
See, an appeal to emotionalism. His is all based on.
So my daughter last night was going to bed and putting her down to sleep, and she said, "Daddy, what color will I be in heaven?" Now, her favorite color is pink, right? Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, what color do you want to be? And I'm thinking she's going to say, well, I want to be pink, pink this, pink princess, whatever. And she says, I want to be brown. Yeah.
That's cool.
I know. I was really.
That's really cool.
It is. And I was so impressed. I said, honey, well, why do you want to be brown? In heaven. And she goes, because I have some friends at church who are brown. Mm-hmm. Isn't that awesome?
That's awesome.
So
it is.
It's
a good transition, not as
humorous
as mine, but okay.
Oh, you see, you're trained to compete and you can't. So ends racism by children realizing you could be brown, you could be white, and your value doesn't change. Mm-hmm. It's okay. She has friends that are non-Caucasian and she loves them and she wants to be like them and whatever, it's all okay.
Here's my first response.
I know. He said
because I've heard this from somebody else, and I think in that innocence of what you're talking about, that's I believe probably the interpretation of it because she just saw something she cares about, wants to be like them.
Is the interpretation
because I think that's valid
right.
in terms of what her.
There's always someone who's willing to twist it.
No, that's true.
Yeah,
and then I'll be the one.
And you're the one.
You're welcome.
So you're up.
You are welcome.
Uh-huh.
Because I heard, I think it was actually from Nancy Pelosi. I heard a video talking about a similar thing.
It's funny because before you said it was Nancy Pearcey. And I was
Nancy Pearcey? Oh, no.
You said Nancy Pearcey. I was
Nancy
like,
Pearcey.
Oh my gosh, really?
No, Nancy Pelosi.
This makes more sense.
Oh.
You said Nancy Pearcey before.
No, I meant Pelosi. That's just because I've been reading much of her stuff. Pearcey stuff lately. But no, this was Nancy Pelosi.
Boy, did she get thrown under the bus.
Yeah. Who was on some video talking about her grandkid who was at their birthday and was saying, blew up the candle, said, what did you wish for? And they said, I wish I could be brown, and she's like, isn't this beautiful? But the context for this, the takeaway, at least what I got from this, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong.
We will.
But the takeaway, I doubt you will because you didn't see it, but somebody maybe who actually saw it.
I saw it.
But the context was takeaway is like, this kid was wishing they weren't white and wishing they were brown or black or whatever, because that was the approved thing. That's sort of Pelosi's sort of take on that. Is like, isn't it beautiful that we can, James said, not be white anymore because being white is bad.
Right.
Talk about a broken dream.
And it is, but it's emblematic of where we are. And it's not merely the race thing. It is whether you're a man. We want our boys to be something other than boys. So we drug them, and we talk about them in such ways that we rob them of opportunities. I listen, an avid watcher of the news, and I listen to these folks on the news, and they will bring people on to the news who will immediately start talking against white people, and they'll never bring a white person on who will talk bad about black people. And the moment that they do, the whole panel is up in arms. But they'll bring people on who will talk about white people. And there's one gal who, I think her name is Simone Brown or whatever. This gal will literally come on television and say, I don't want this guy to have the job because he's white. Qualification has nothing to do with it. It's just that he's white. Even Chuck Schumer just said, we can't have another Supreme Court justice who was a white male.
Right.
And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, look, this is,
who cares what the quality of their thinking is?
This is totally a perversion of what Martin Luther King talked about. It's a perversion of it. And any reasonable black person who is sitting there listening to this, or unreasonable person and shaking your head, yeah, this is how we need to go in America. This is sickness.
See, your daughter is a sickness. That's what he's saying.
No. I'm just saying.
My daughter views the solution.
Yes.
Where it just
it is not. We're just living in an insane time in our country's history where up is down and down is sideways. It's just
everyone is doing what's right in their own eyes.
Right. It's
not doing what's right.
And that's I think the framework.
Or right in their own emotions.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the more.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The eyes of the gateway to dust.
So what we're saying is it's okay to want to identify with your friends.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
That is a beautiful thing.
That's a beautiful thing to want to identify with your friends. It's not okay to say that it's wrong to be a man, it's wrong to be a woman, or it's wrong to be this or that. You catch what I'm saying?
If it's a sense of self-loathing,
Right. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. No, wait a minute. We're not saying that Rachel Dolezal is. The one we ought to be.
No, but it does bring up, as you mentioned, the being wrong, being male in our culture where now gender is fluid.
Right.
Okay. Is there any such thing as male? And so, if so, is maleness can even be wrong since it doesn't really exist?
Well,
it's a real. This is the mental insanity of what's being endorsed as quality intellectual abilities.
Yeah.
In our culture.
Look at it in the context of race. Okay, so I have this little thing that's interesting. The title of this article it's actually from a book called The Myth of Race. But the article begins with this question, this assertion, there is no such thing as race.
Well, that was easy.
And I know, right? But here's what they say. This is interesting. It says, in 1950, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, made this conclusion after this lengthy study. They said all human beings are of the same species and that race is not a biological reality, but a myth. That's interesting from the United Nations. So today, the vast majority of those involved in research look at biological situations, say races do not exist among humans. Among those who study the subject, who use and accept modern scientific techniques and logic, this scientific fact is as valid and true as the fact that the earth is round and revolves around the sun.
Well, wait a second. They're saying
now,
the earth is flat nowadays, though.
What's that?
They're saying the earth is flat nowadays, though.
Yeah. But the fascinating part about this is not from a Christian worldview. This is, United Nations. This book is not from it. This article was not from it, which is why I chose this one in particular. Because when I had a friend who was doing this intercultural PhD studies thing or whatever, and this question came up. I'm like, what sources on race and humanity and this idea that race is a cultural construct,
social construct, right?
Yeah, came up.
I have friends
and I was
who make that same
shocked to
argument.
hear that from them, because the approach that they're taking is everything is about race. racial this or racial that, racial solutions and, all these sort of things. So I was shocked. And so I did some research and looked at all these books from sociologists who are none of them believers, looking at all their things. And they all say the same thing, what this says. It's a social construct. It's invented by culture. And so I'm thinking, how does that make sense? How do you jive the two between it's a social manufactured construct, yet it's the one and only thing that matters most about anything?
So you're talking about the contradiction in terms where one person says race is a social construct, meaning that it's not a real thing.
Yeah.
And then the other people who say this is the only thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, because if you go now, and they talk about microaggressions in
Sure.
schools, and you look at their policies. So this is an actual considered microaggression. If I say to Leroy, Leroy, I don't see you as a black man. I see you as my brother in Christ. That
is a microaggression.
Is a microaggression aggression and called racism.
Because I'm denying.
Because I'm denying.
For you to say that to him, what if he were to say that to you?
Oh, it's good because I'm black.
That'd be good because he's black.
Right. So it's very limited in what it means. So it's not a universal truth. It's a truth against white people.
Right.
Well, it's not even a truth that's consistent with its own worldview, because if it's an aggression, if it's racism for me to say I see you as a brother, to take something that's a social construct and say that is not as significant to me as, from a believer standpoint, something that is an eternal truth secured by the death and resurrection, the blood of Jesus Christ. We have become brothers. That changes truly an essential quality of who we are.
Oh, this is a big point.
That's an ontological reality of our being, is that we become brothers in Christ. I'm saying that is more significant than the social construct.
This is a big point.
That, to me, then that becomes racism, even though the very people who say it's racism agree that it doesn't exist.
Watch this. This is such a good point, because there's a lot.
I know, I made it.
There's a lot of young guys that I've been in conversations with who will make the same argument. And I can think of his name right now, and I hope he watches this video because you know what I'm talking about. He will make the argument. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. He will make the argument that race is a social construct, and he'll read me the data that proves it. But the whole tenor of our conversation is always about racism. Do you see the point?
Yeah.
The whole point is that race isn't really real.
Yeah.
Race as a social construct is not really real. But we need to do and orient everything that we can to deal with racial issues. It's not.
Yeah. So the solution isn't to put it in its place as a non-essential quality. The solution is, hey, it's a non-essential quality, therefore we must make it the most essential quality to remove it. This article says this exact thing. Listen to this quote. It says, it just seems, after observing the craziness of the world, that the belief of human races, carrying along with it the prejudices and hatred of racism, is so embedded in our culture and has been an integral part of the worldview for so long that many of us assume that it just must be so. That's exactly what Christians are arguing. Saying, look, it's embedded in the culture, but the way to get it is to recognize it's a cultural construct, and people have created this sense of racial distinction to purposely abuse and oppress others. And so the solution is to eliminate that false construct under one that is more significant and important. Our common humanity.
But you know what happens if you do that?
We're all humans is also now a microaggression and racism.
If you do that, if you try to, we all know that race is not an essential property. There are people born without color. They're called albinos. It is not an essential property. It's an accidental property of humanity. My point is, if we were to take this thing seriously, as you say, that means that the solution and the tool by which we do away with that isn't the same tools and means that we carry on racism with. It's to do away with it. It's to act as if it doesn't exist and to reinstitute something that is more real and more true and pursue that. Yeah. So if I'm going to say that race is a social construct, I cannot go to my friends who happen to not look like me and make race the big issue, because I'm saying one thing out of one side of my mouth and I'm doing something else out of the other side of my mouth. It's hypocrisy.
Yeah. So you brought up the word accidental and essential. I said essential itself, but I didn't use accidental. I said not.
And accidental.
I want to do it. It's a word. our resident expert. We'll bring you in this one because most people won't. It doesn't sound like, hey, Leroy, you're black man is accidental. Like, oh, I fell over and I became black. You know, that's not what it means.
Right.
So explain that because, I mean, seriously, I know people listening would be like, what does he mean, accidental?
Right.
Accidental simply means, as mentioned, not necessary. You could lose the property.
It's a philosophical term, right?
It is a philosophical term. It's a category distinction. What they're trying to say is things like if you have a red ball, right? If you change the color of that ball to black, you still have the ball, even though you don't. It's not red. Redness is not an essential trait to it, as opposed to like the number 2. Essentially, the number 2 is a even number. It's even, so it couldn't be odd and still be the number 2. An essential trait to it is its evenness. We have that on a variety of things. So, like for being a human a human being, the color, your color, if we're going to limit race to that, although there might be other factors for race, though. It depends on what you may rate. There's different, races within the human. There's pygmies and there's other people, but either there's a common trait to being a human, and that's the race. The color part isn't essential for you to be a human being.
Right.
This is one reason why Christianity promotes. It's the only one that promotes equality between all human beings. Is that we're creating the image and likeness of God, and that's not the color of one's skin.
Yeah,
it's who we are internally, and that's what makes black people worthwhile and white people worthwhile. One of the questions I have with people who talk about this, if they're going to African Americans, black, it's like, well, our lives matter too. The question is why? Why does your life matter? Who says who it matters? If it's a social construct, if everything is a social construct, then there's no value other than you saying it. Why should I as a non-black person, why should I value your life?
The whole term Black Lives Matter, even the assertion of it, is an appeal. It's an appeal for you to say that I matter.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
But my question is based on what?
Based on what? Exactly. Based on them conferring worth to me.
Right. But that's why should I listen to that?
Exactly.
It's non-authoritative unless the value comes from the image of God in man, and that's every man. Man is every human being.
Right.
So anyway,
which is what we've lost in the last even amongst Christians. And as you know, I mean, working towards my thought proposal for PhD stuff, I want to work at how do we establish that, because I think what happens is even amongst Christians, as we've sort of degraded the authority of Scripture, the Old Testament as a reliable source in terms of like the Genesis account and God's creation of Adam and Eve, that kind of stuff. We've diminished the value of that. And I think for many young Christians, we've lost the sense of what is the sacred nature of human life. Mm-hmm. We've lost that foundation. Mm-hmm. So as the culture has shifted away from accepting that, and
there is no foundation without it.
Yeah, exactly. So then what happens is we have a lot of young Christians who, as the culture shifted, they've shifted, and now we've lost any sense of what it means to have a sense of human value and dignity and where we are.
And it's interesting because we've not only lost that, we've lost a moral center. What does it mean to be, not just right, but what is good? Mm-hmm. I was talking to someone earlier. We kill each other 1,000, if not 10,000 times a day on television. Mm. We murder each other thousands of times every day on video games. I mean, and it's not merely just shooting someone from a distance. You have to run up on them and stab them, and we kill the human image, and we tell our children that there's no real worth here. I think the kid's name was Mitchell Johnson. I cannot be sure. I think he was a kid from Kentucky. But he's one of these earlier school shooters from the 90s. And when they asked him, it might be him, it might be another kid. It was an Indian kid who also was a school shooter. But when they asked this kid, why did you do this? The kid said out of his own mouth, well, you tell us every day that life doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're all evolved from pond scum.
Oh, you didn't lock the door? Look at you.
Didn't lock the door.
I'll see you in a minute. Okay. Leroy did not do his job. Oh no, because he was in early. Ward came in last. Ward did not lock.
But the kid said,
"You're still responsible for the lock."
The kid said, "Nope." The kid said, "Listen, you tell me every day that we evolved from pond scum or some crazy thing like that. you tell me that life doesn't matter, and he said, I took you seriously.
Yeah.
That's why I did it.
Yeah.
Who are these things? But people who are in the way of my actualization.
Jeffrey Dahmer lived out Darwinian evolution.
To its logical conclusion.
Exactly.
And what I'm saying is,
Dawkins today recommended that we start eating human flesh.
Right. Then the other atheist says we ought to eat other people. And the point is, if you don't have an ultimate, and we're back to our square one, if there's no real ultimate value, there's no real ultimate value. One that we refer to, that is a referent for us.
Has to be
outside of us.
It can't be what we make up.
Can't be what we make up. But if there's no real referent, then all bets are off.
And that's where that's actually a direction I wanted us to go a lot today. We're out of time right now, but I'm going to give a reading assignment for everybody. And I know we've talked about this before with you. So Reinhold Niebuhr wrote a book 50, 60 years ago now called Moral Man and Immoral Society. And I have some quotes that I want us to go through, and I'll just read some of these quotes maybe next time, and we'll get to those when we can. But maybe if anyone just wants to pick up the book, it was like 99 cents on Kindle, or just go to a used bookstore, buy it, whatever. But I disagree with everything he says, but that's not the point. In him is, if you want to understand, I argue, if you want to understand the issues of Black Lives Matter, if you want to understand the issue of white privilege and what that means or where it comes from culturally, philosophically, read his book, and you will be shocked at how many of those quotes change a few words here or there because the terminology was different in his day that he was using, but it is exactly where we are at. So his worldview, philosophy, his socio-political philosophy, which was rooted in Marxism, is essentially where we are today. And so, people can read it, check it out, but I think we'll read some of that and delve into that idea of inherent dignity, worth, value, the sacredness of humanity. But what happens when we lack it? Where does the culture get it? Because there's an answer of where they get it, where they argue it is from, but it's still quite destructive. And so that's what we'll get for next time for Off the Cuff when we meet next time, next Wednesday, 2 p.m. West Coast time, and we'll be back for that. All right?
Awesome.
You guys can say any word out. I'm going to shut it up.
Lord bless.
Awkward silence.